me the proper depth and breadth? I can to a hair's breadth, Trim, replied my uncle. I would throw out the earth upon this hand towards the town for the scarp, and on that hand towards the campaign for the counterscarp. Very right, Trim, quoth my uncle Toby. And when I had sloped them to your mind, and please your honour, I would place the glasses, as the finest fortifications are done in Flanders, with swords, and as your honour knows they should be, and I would make the walls and parapets with swords too. The best engineers call them gazons, Trim, said my uncle Toby. Whether they are gazons or swords is not much matter, replied Trim. Your honour knows they are 10 times beyond a facing either of brick or stone. I know they are, Trim, in some respects, quoth my uncle Toby, nodding his head, for a cannon ball enters into the gazon right onwards without bringing any rubbish down from it, which might fill the fosse, as was the case at St. Nicholas Gate, and facilitate the passage over it. Your honour understands these matters, replied Corporal Trim, better than any officer in his Majesty's service. But would your honour please to let the bespeaking of the table alone, and let us but go into the country? I would work under your honour's directions like a horse, and make fortifications for your something like a tansy, with all their batteries, saps, ditches, and palisadoes, that it should be worth all the world's riding 20 miles to go and see it. My uncle Toby blushed as red as scarlet as Trim went on, but it was not a blush of guilt, of modesty, or of anger. It was a blush of joy. He was fired with Corporal Trim's project and description. Trim, said my uncle Toby, thou hast said enough. We might begin the campaign, continued Trim, on the very day that his Majesty and the allies take the field, and demolish them town by town as fast as— Trim, quoth my uncle Toby, say no more. Your honour, continued Trim, might sit in your armchair, pointing to it, this fine weather, giving me your orders, and I would— Say no more, Trim, quoth my uncle Toby. Besides, your honour would get not only pleasure and good pastime, but good air and good exercise and good health, and your honour's wound would be well in a month. Thou hast said enough, Trim, quoth my uncle Toby, putting his hand into his breeches pocket. I like thy project mightily, and if your honour pleases, I'll this moment go and buy a Pyrenees spade to take down with us, and I'll bespeak a shovel and a pickaxe and a couple of— Say no more, Trim, quoth my uncle Toby, leaping up upon one leg, quite overcome with rapture, and thrusting a guinea into Trim's hand. Trim, said my uncle Toby, say no more, but go down, Trim, this moment, my lad, and bring up my supper this instant. Trim ran down and brought up his master's supper, to no purpose. Trim's plan of operation ran so in my uncle Toby's head, he could not taste it. Trim, quoth my uncle Toby, get me to bed. It was all one. Corporal Trim's description had fired his imagination. My uncle Toby could not shut his eyes. The more he considered it, the more bewitching the scene appeared to him, so that 2 full hours before daylight he had come to a final determination, and had concerted the whole plan of his and Corporal Trim's decampment. My uncle Toby had a little neat country house of his own in the village where my father's estate lay in Shandy, which had been left him by an old uncle with a small estate of about £100 a year behind his house, and Contiguous to it was a kitchen garden of about half an acre, and at the bottom of the garden, and cut off from it by a tall yew hedge, was a bowling green, containing just about as much ground as Corporal Trim wished for, so that as Trim uttered the words, a rood and a half of ground to do what they would with, this identical bowling green instantly presented itself and became curiously painted all at once upon the retina of my uncle Toby's fancy, which was the physical cause of making him change colour, or at least of heightening his blush to that immoderate degree I spoke of. Never did lover post down to a beloved mistress with more heat and expectation than my uncle Toby did to enjoy this self same thing in private. I say in private, for it was sheltered from the house, as I told you, by a tall yew hedge, and was covered on the other three sides from mortal sight by rough holly and thick set flowering shrubs. So the idea of not being seen did not a little contribute to the idea of pleasure preconceived in my uncle Toby's mind. Vain thought! However thick it was planted about, or private soever it might seem, to think, dear uncle Toby, of enjoying a thing which took up a whole rood and a half of ground, and not have it known. How my uncle Toby and Corporal Trim managed this matter, with the history of their campaigns, which were no way barren of events, may make no uninteresting underplot in the epitasis and working up of this drama. At present the scene must drop, and change for the parlour fireside. End of chapter.